Hello there. It is August 28th, 2025. I'm Alan Zundel, and this is the Spiritual and Political Podcast. Today I have updates on some candidates who are running outside of the two major parties and have a realistic chance of making an impact in the 2026 elections. The first is U.S. Senate candidate Dan Osborn in Nebraska, who is running as an independent. The second is Butch Ware, who is running for governor of California, along with a host of other people, but he has the chance of getting in the top two and getting on the general election ballot as a Green Party candidate, which in California would be unprecedented. And finally, Kshama Sawant is running as an independent for the ninth congressional seat in Washington state. Each of them has a chance of making an impact that's beyond that a usual alternative candidate, that is someone from a minor party or from a running as an independent, could make in an election. First of all, let's turn towards one of the articles I saw recently, and this is from the Ballot Access News, but it's based on an article which was in Notice, N-U-T-U-S, about the number of candidates running as independents in 2026. And they mentioned candidates for this U.S. Senate, not only in Nebraska, but in Idaho, Mississippi, and South Dakota, and candidates for governor in Michigan as well as California. Now, the difference is most of these candidates are not going to make much of an impact at all because they're running in plurality systems where both the Democrat and Republican are going to be running in the same race. When that happens, plurality means that each voter gets one vote, and whichever candidate gets the most votes wins, even if it's not a majority. So in that kind of system, which is the one we usually use in this country, rather than something like a top two system or a ranked choice voting system, in that kind of a system, the independent has a slim chance because independent voters don't always vote for independent candidates. They, like the rest of us, believe that the Republican or the Democrat has the best chance of winning, so we will vote for the one we least dislike, maybe not the one we most like, but the one we least dislike when it comes to the final election. And of course, independents could lean either way. Some might go Republican, some might go Democrat. Many might go for the independent, many might stay home. So it's very hard to get them to vote in a block for an independent candidate, which means that candidate is usually not going to win, is going to come in at best third place. The exception is in a couple of these states where we have a top two system, which can mean that a candidate might get to the general election ballot as one of only two candidates. And in Nebraska, the difference is that the Democratic Party is not going to run against the independent. Let's turn towards that one first. In 2024, Dan Osborn ran as an independent against the Republican incumbent Deb Fischer and got 46.5% of the vote to her 53.2% of the vote. Now, the important thing there is that the Democrats did not run anyone in that race. In Nebraska, Democrats almost never win. I don't know if they ever win, but it's a very red state. And the Democrats decided better to give an independent a chance who is not tarred with the label Democratic Party and just not run somebody. In fact, their senatorial campaign arm with its political action committee gave money to Osborn, even though he was not a Democrat, because they wanted to get that Republican out of there. So in 2024, if Osborn had only gotten another 4% of the Republican vote, that is not the Republican voters necessarily, but those who voted for Deb Fischer, if Osborn had captured another 4% of the people who had ended up voting for Fischer, he would have won the election by a very slim margin, but he would have won it. So that was the Senate race in 2024. The one coming up this year is the other U.S. Senator, Pete Ricketts, running as a Republican again. And there is another Republican, I don't know much about, Edward Dunn, running as well. And finally, Dan Osborn. So there will be a Republican primary, and Ricketts will win unless there's something really surprising about Dunn or Ricketts has a heart attack or something. Osborn is running again, and again, the Democrats are not going to run somebody against him. So if he just does a little bit better than last time around, he could win that Senate seat in the state of Nebraska. Ricketts is a billionaire, and he is friendly towards Trump, and so he has a lot of money to play with and to put up ads and to find ways to run negative campaigning against Osborn. But Osborn, because he got that publicity first time around, is not as new as before, but he's better known than he was before. And he has a shot, I think, at winning this thing. So that is one to watch. The next race is the governor's seat in California. Now, the difference here is that California does not have that usual kind of plurality system. They have a top two system where rather than having each party choose its nominee, you have every candidate from every party running in one big primary in which all the voters can vote. Each voter can vote for any of those candidates. And the two who get the most votes are the two who show up in the general election ballot. Now, this has not been a friendly system for independents or alternative party candidates because the vote is usually heavily skewed towards Democrats in most places, this being a largely blue state, this I am in California. And in the Republican congressional districts, usually the independent doesn't have a chance in the general election. But even so, they rarely get onto the general election ballot because they can't get through that primary. They can't get enough votes to get into the top two. Usually the Democrat and the Republican, once again, get enough votes. Even if it's a very small percentage of the votes out of all those candidates, they'll usually be the two in the top two, or maybe two Democrats in a heavily Democratic district, or maybe two Republicans in a heavy Republican district. So it seems like it gives an opening for independent and alternative party candidates, but they rarely make it to the top position. However, I think there is a chance, I don't know how big of a chance yet, but a chance for a candidate from another party to actually get on the general election ballot, if not win. I think winning is less likely. This is Butch Ware, who was the vice presidential candidate for the Green Party in 2024. With presidential candidate Jill Stein. So he has become fairly well known and is the Green Party is highly active in California, even though they usually don't get a really high percentage of the vote. But he is running a very vigorous campaign, making a lot of appearances, going to podcasts, raising money, traveling around and talking to groups. So he has been very active on the campaign trail, which most candidates of the Green Party are not able to do for one reason or another. Now, if we look at the polls for the candidates in California, this is a couple of recent polls, neither of which asked about Mr. Ware or, in fact, asked about any of the candidates outside the Republicans and Democrats. I should add that in that race, there are so far declared for this 8 Democrats, 7 Republicans, a Libertarian, the Green Party candidate, and 3 independent candidates. So the vote is likely to be spread widely among all those various candidates. And they took 2 recent polls to find out how the candidates were faring, but they did not ask the voters about Butch Ware, the Green Party candidate, or the Libertarian candidate, or the 3 independent candidates. They only asked about the Democratic and Republican candidates, even those candidates who are getting a very little attention and have a very slim chance of getting in the top 2 or anywhere near it for that matter. Look at these 2 polls. The first one is from the Emerson College poll conducted on August 4th and 5th. And we see Katie Porter at the top. Now, right after Kamala Harris announced she wasn't going to run for governor of California, Katie Porter, who was a former congressperson in California, she shot up, but she only got up to about 18 or 17%. So she's at the top on both of these polls. The one on the left is the Emerson College poll, and the one on the right is the Berkeley IGS poll conducted just after the Emerson poll. Emerson was on August 4th and 5th. Berkeley was on August 11th through 17th. And IGS stands for the Institute of Governmental Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. So you see Katie Porter at the top of both these lists in terms of where the voters polled for this, when they were asked who they supported, they turned towards her. She's the best known of the Democratic candidates, I would say. And but that's less than 20% of the vote there. So there's a good chance that she may be in the top two. But somebody could outpace her if somebody with a stronger name recognition or more money, or just in some way connects with the voters better with their message and pulls ahead of her. So there's a lot of time for somebody else to pull ahead. And then in the other top positions, there's Steve Hilton, another rich guy who is a Republican, and then Xavier Becerra, another Democrat, and finally Chad Bianco, who is at the top in both these lists, near the top, second place on one and third place on another. So these are small numbers, and they could easily be changed quite radically by the margin of error or just by slightly different news coverage of the candidates in that particular week. So you what you can tell from this is that nobody's getting a real high percentage of the vote so far. And at the very bottom, undecided on the Emerson poll is 38%. Same thing in the Berkeley poll is 38%. So almost 40% of the voters are undecided who they're going to vote for governor of California. Again, they did not ask about Mr. Ware. Now, what can we say about Bruce Ware? Is that when they ran for president here in California, the vote did not show a large number of voters for the Green Party. That is only a slightly over 1% of the vote. So there's about almost 16 million voters in California, and the Green Party ticket for president only got about 1/10 of those, got 167,000, almost 168,000. So very small percentage of the vote. But the difference here is that in a presidential race, people are even more so going to lean towards the Republican or Democrat and ignore the other candidates because they have very slim chance of winning across the whole country. But this may be different when it comes to running for governor of California. The Republican and Democratic candidates are not going to be as well known. Voters are not going to feel as constrained in who they vote for because it's not a presidential election at stake. It's a governor's seat. And if somebody can get in the top two, they will give them their attention. So this does not necessarily mean that the Green Party has no chance. And in fact, Mr. Ware got invited to a big event which is again unusual for a Green Party candidate, talking about how much work he is doing to get notice here. He was invited to participate in the governor's debate with the Service Employees International Union held on August 16th. So that is not something that often happens. And just like in the polls, the media often refuse to cover alternative party candidates. So it is hard for the voters to learn about them. But in this case, the union did want to hear from the Green Party candidate. This is a photo of the candidates up there on the stage. You can't see all of them, but you do see Mr. Ware, or I should say Dr. Ware, Professor Ware, because he is a college professor. Over there on the far right, listening to Katie Porter answer a question. Here's another photo. You see all the candidates they invited, and this time it included not only Republicans and Democrats, but Butch Ware, who's near the center there. And then finally, the size of the audience was respectable for a governor's debate this early in the process. Of course, the unions are going to be very engaged in this race because they have a lot at stake when it comes to who is the governor of California. All right, so Mr. Ware is out there campaigning, and he is making somewhat of an impact. Hard to tell yet how he's doing. Those polls did not include him, but I am thinking that he does have a chance with all the candidates in this race splitting the vote between them. He has a chance of pulling it into at least the second place position and getting on the ballot, which is something that has not happened previously. All right. Same thing in Washington. They got a top two system, and they have an independent candidate running with high name recognition. This would be Kshama Sawant, who was on the Seattle City Council and a very controversial figure because she is a well-known socialist, Marxist socialist, and was on the city council. And raised a lot of hackles on the part of the billionaires that live around Seattle, the high-tech people. She is running for the U.S. Congress seat number 9 in Washington State. And what you see here is the candidates that she is running against so far, 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. Adam Smith is the incumbent Democrat, and he's been in that seat for a while. But I want you to notice Melissa Chaudhry, who is also running as a Democrat because she came in second 2 years ago, the last time this seat was up for election. Let's take a look at that one. Now, Melissa Chaudhry, she got about 30,000 votes, and Adam Smith got about 78, almost 79,000, and the rest were a little below there, including the Republican with the highest total came in a little bit behind Melissa Chaudhry, again, a Democrat. Remember that number, 30,000 votes, about 30,229 votes, because let us look at how Sawant came in the city elections in Seattle. 22,263 votes. So if you compare that to Chaudhry, let me jump back against, that is 30,000 votes that she got last year to get in the top 2. And then in 2019, Sawant got 22,000. So she's a good way. If she can keep those votes from Seattle, the people who voted for her for Seattle City Council back then, if she can keep those voters, she has an excellent chance of outpacing the next highest total, which would probably be Melissa Chaudhry again. All right, and she won that seat over and over, and she beat a recall campaign that, the billionaires around there, the tech people, wanted to get her out of that office. They didn't like her program, high taxes and things like that. So they tried to get rid of her, and were not successful. All right, one final remark for today, and that is I have been talking about the top 2 system that they have in California and Washington. And in California, there is a lawsuit I have mentioned from time to time. Most recently, my story was that case had been, the hearing had been delayed because there was a motion to dismiss the case on the part of the government. Well, the judge decided that they will have a Zoom status conference on October 24th. So that's still quite a ways off. And my assumption is that that means that she has not decided to dismiss the case, but is ready to bring the parties together to find out if they want to agree to any facts that then they can avoid cluttering up the trial with a lot of unnecessary argumentation. If they can agree on what's in dispute, or maybe come to some kind of settlement. I don't know what that status conference is about, but it involves the judge and the parties to the case. So that is on October 24th, and it will be live streamed on Zoom, so you can actually watch that. I'll give you more information about how to find that link when it gets closer to October, but essentially you go to the website for the second U.S. District Court of the Northern District up there in San Francisco. Look for the judge. I think it's Maxine Chesney. I'll find that information, but you go there and you can find the link. I should refresh my memory. All right, that's it for today. So that's my updates on candidates worth watching in the 2026 election for those of us who are interested in seeing the dominance of the 2-party system broken or at least cracked. Thanks for watching. If you like this kind of content or you like my presentation, do like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with other people, let people know that I'm covering this kind of stuff, as well as odds and ends of my other interests in life. Thanks a lot for watching, and hope you come back again. Bye.